I had actually thought out something to talk to you all about, and of course I'm the anchor, so I've got to ask questions. But I can see over the morning, a lot of that's been covered. So what I thought I'd do is, I've got some serious questions because these are serious people. I would call these people the professional gatekeepers of information, because each one comes from a different organization, and each one has a slightly different or a different role, but is still protecting the information that's coming out of their organization. But before we start that, I thought I'd just divulge, just for a couple of minutes, a very short story. It was a couple of years ago, BBC Hindi found me. They did a story, it went viral. A couple of years later, one of the news channels, one of the heads of the news channels saw that, kept bothering me all the time, and called me over. And I'd never been a correspondent. I've worn lots of hats in my life. I've done lots of things, but I've never been into politics doing the coverage. The next thing I know, I'm covering the UP elections. So I'm all excited. They get this crew, and we've got all this camera equipment that I have no understanding of what it all is. We've got this whole team. We arrive at Delhi Airport. When we arrive at Delhi Airport, and we've done all the check-in and everything, for some reason, something twigged with the security, and they thought, this is a foreigner, what's he up to? So what they did was, they wanted to call me down below to check and explain to them all the cameras. Now, I was very lucky because my cameraman has green eyes. So he immediately became Charles Thomson, and I became Pratik. So he went down as Charles Thomson and explained to them. Meantime, I was in a dilemma. The plane was about to leave from Delhi. And this is my first interstate, my big chance in this industry in India. And I didn't want the plane to leave. So I did what I always do. I spoke to them in Hindi. Hum Bihar ke hai, aap log Bihar ke hai. And they're all Biharis. So they took it on themselves to protect me. And I won't name the airline, but they told the airline, you are not taking off until he's on the plane. In the meantime, unbeknown to me, there was another news crew there filming what I was doing. And of course, I was totally innocent, totally naive, had no idea what was going on. And then this news crew, they started asking me questions. This particular gentleman asked me questions. And then I thought nothing of it, got on the plane, got to Benares, had a good sleep. The next morning, unbeknown to me, my producer had not slept. Our news channel had spent the whole night screaming on him and shouting on him. And he didn't want to spoil my feeling and all of this, because after all, I have to perform. Then what happened, in the middle of the day, we're in Benares somewhere, and this news crewman, the head of that channel, he found me. And then, to the hysterics of my whole team, I said, we have to run. So we ran away because I was becoming the news item. Now, what also happened was, I managed to convert a lot of Modi fans in Benares, and they became my spies. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is, this is the gentleman. That video went viral. I have not seen it to today, but it caused absolute angst. And when we talk about media penetration and disruption, that is perfect disruption, that is perfect penetration, and that is media. Now, the other thing I would add, I was told, please ask him to take it down. Now, what I must say, this gentleman is a gentleman, because, of course, he's not taking it down. But every time I sent him a message, he said, no, we're taking it down. It's okay. It's coming down. It's coming down. So it was a wonderful introduction. And now I had no picking of who I was going to meet or who I was going to see. Now, so that's one story for this gentleman. Then there's another very quick story. I couldn't get a flight to Bombay, and I'm going for a Bollywood interview. So I got on the Rajdhani, and I'm doing my Indotanki, Hindi mein baat kar raha hai. I've been told not to speak too much Hindi. And doing all of that on the thing. In the next compartment, there was a 6-foot guy just watching me the whole time, the whole night. In the morning, he couldn't take it any longer, and he came up and he said, "Tum kaun hai? Kahan gaya?" I said, "Bihari Lal ho." So he took all my details. So his name is Rajiv. He's a producer-director. And his wife is Nagma, who's a very close friend and has worked with this wonderful lady here and helped her with some of her books. So that's another magical connection. The last magical connection is, I say Srimati Jha. She's originally from Bengal, but I grew up in Bihar. So whenever I hear Jha, I immediately think of Bihar. Now, let's get to some more serious points on this. Now, of course, we've heard in the morning about fake news. What I would like to ask each one of the panelists, just in a few words, what is each one of their company that they've seen do to try and help the stopping of misinformation? I won't say disinformation because that's what a journalist has to tackle, but with misinformation, what are the steps that today in your company that you're doing? So if I may first ask you.
Charles, first of all, you're such a TV star. I'm sure you know that. You just speak so well. Okay. I anchor this show called Reality Check. So fake news is very, very relevant to what we are doing. And you know, what is very, very evident is the fact that across the world, this has become the biggest problem. I think because thanks to Trump, fake news is something that everyone's trying to counter. What we're missing, of course, is that unlike something like New Yorker, which has a huge desk of fact checkers, and I guess you can make out the importance of tracking fake news from the fact that there are now two really interesting startups like Alt News who are just tackling fake news. It's a measure of how much of a problem it is. However, what's interesting to people like me is, and I think there are academic studies which have looked into that, which say that you don't really need like a huge team of fact checkers to just handle fake news. Really simple steps, like for example, you know, a leader has a rally today and he says, okay, we are going to have every household in that village has 100% electricity. I think all it requires, and I think we all have to do that now, because traditionally, what's also interesting to me as someone who studied this is fake news is not a new phenomena. It's been that traditionally in history as well, in various parts of history, phases of history, whether it's American history and other parts as well. What you needed, and it's always been tackled by good old-fashioned journalism, which is what we do. So yes, you have great startups which are catering just to that, but good old-fashioned news reporting, which involves, so somebody says, okay, so-and-so, that village has completely gone 100%. All that we need to do as fact checkers is make sure one of our reporters, one of our colleagues goes there, talks to people, makes calls to people, and immediately you'll know. And the responsibility that we have to our viewers or our readers as people who are giving out information is to tell people this is what it is. Even if we know, okay, suppose we can't verify it ourselves, but we do know this is what they put out, this is the information in the public domain, and this is how it contrasts with reality. I think even if you do just that, it goes a long way.
Bhupendra ji?
मैं तो अभी आपको ही देख के थोड़ा अचंभित हूँ कि फेक क्या है और असली क्या है। मैं थोड़ा उसमें फंस गया हूँ कि आप बिहारी लाल हैं कि आप चार्ल्स थॉमसन हैं। And I must admit it because I have always looked at you as बिहारी लाल।
हाँ जी।
So मैं तो हमेशा से आपका जो इंट्रोडक्शन है मैं बिहारी लाल के स्वरूप में ही देखता था मैं। चार्ल्स थॉमसन आज मुझे स्ट्राइक किया कि आपका असली नाम चार्ल्स थॉमसन।
I was told. So.
You were okay.
In the afternoon, I'm going to change.
Okay, good. Okay. I think, look, the question that you have raised is to my mind, it's a very stereotypical question. And the reason why I say that is that we are now in the world of post-truth, as it's often described. Truth is it based on facts? What are facts? I may choose to say that this bottle is half full. You may say that it's half empty. I think this whole business of fake news versus reality ultimately stems from that. There is no doubt about the fact that there is a completely new machinery of propaganda. And I see that a lot of top propagandist companies are all sitting in this room itself. So pardon me if I'm saying something which is politically incorrect. But I do believe that what is really happening, and the biggest challenge before conventional journalists, old world journalists, is that the gap between what is PR and what is truth, or what's a fact, that's diminishing very quickly. I'll quickly, since you started off with a couple of stories, I'll just give you just yesterday's instance. So we've just come off of this very intense and grueling round of assembly elections, and all of us are busy with its coverage. So I've been now in the business now for 2 decades, and I have a personal equation with a lot of politicians as well. So I ended up tweeting about the outgoing Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister yesterday, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, and I said, and I tagged him publicly, and I said, well done. you have earned the right of walking out of this electoral battlefield with your head held high. Because the difference between the BJP and the Congress ultimately is just around about 0.1%, that too which is skewed in favor of the Bharatiya Janata Party. But lo and behold, because I tweeted and Mr. Chauhan ended up thanking me publicly for that, and the words he used, simply because he's known of me for a while, his family is well known to me, he said, "Bhupendraji, thank you very much for your relentless support." Now, what is the truth of that statement? Is the truth of that statement that I'm some BJP propagandist? Is the truth of that statement that I'm supporting a particular individual? Or is the truth of the statement that I simply made a statement? Dr. Anurag Batra is a dear friend of mine. If I say that, Dr. Batra, I've had a good time at your session, and if Dr. Batra says, "Bhupendraji, thank you very much for your relentless support," does it imply that I become a propagandist for Dr. Batra? I think the problem between fake news and reality is stuck somewhere in between. I have no doubt on my mind that there is no immediate solution. I think that the only way one can really take a step forward to deal with the menace of fake news is just to try and make one's own self as aware as possible. You're living in a scenario where data which is often put out by the government itself can be interpreted in multiple ways. Ghanshyam Tiwari's just walked in. And I often say this. I often say this, that ultimately what's going on is that if you can't believe data itself, if there is no sanctity, if there is no authority, no credibility associated with data itself, then how do you conclude what is reality and what is fake news? That, I believe, is a challenge, and I don't foresee any straightforward short-term solution to that.
Thank you. Ma'am.
I've often been called Bihar ki Bahu, so thank you for the Shrimati Jha bit.
I have a problem in saying names, and I don't want to be disrespectful, so I have to be very careful with
And
some
you'd stumble
names.
over Nilanjana.
And even my name, which is Charles Thomson, is Chow or Chi. Finally, they meet me, you're not Chinese. So that's why I use the titles.
Shrimati Jha is absolutely fine. Okay. I think all of us have been reporters, for me in my previous life, and I've spent many years now as a digital journalist. I've set up 3 of India's premier digital newsrooms. And I think in my daily operations, would probably face this whole menace of fake news most immediately. Because that is where you're publishing, you're getting a deluge of information from all over. And I would agree with Sunetra when you say, journalism 101 takes care of about 95% of the filters that you need to ensure that fake news does not go through your platforms or your channel. The rest of the 5%, I believe you've had a long session, a long day of sessions where you've discussed tools, you would have discussed things like, for just publishing and, publishing quickly and publishing loads and, huge volumes of news and content and pictures and video. A lot of times you just see people sharing, say, a video from Czechoslovakia or someplace where you'll have a building collapsing. And someone's going to say, that happened in Mumbai yesterday when the building collapsed and it fell on cars and stuff like that. And you told me that you discussed tools. You have video tools, you have image search tools, you have all of those things that you do. Basically, in a newsroom like mine, those are SOPs, right? So every journalist who works in a newsroom like mine and like their newsroom or their newsroom will make sure that these things will go through those filters of checks before they reach you. The other things that brands, trusted brands do for their news and information dissemination is that they will take news only from trusted sources. So newsrooms spend a lot of money in subscribing to agencies like Reuters and AFP and AP and PTI, which give you that guarantee of having reporters out who will verify news and give you, and there's a trust, commitment that I get from them that this is verified news. Then we have our own reporters out, and usually if a piece of information is not verified by our reporters, or it is not, or a picture is not verified, or a video does not come from them, we will not use it. I think in all of this debate about fake news, the one thing that has really become relevant is trusted news brands. And as we see a lot of these, and I will call them fly-by-night sort of, news setups which come up, they curate news, they sort of often use news without attribution. I find a lot of stuff that we put up on any one of my sites getting, copy-pasted on other websites without as much as an attribution, without as much as even saying that this was first carried in HD. It's not going to damage me much, really. I'm a 60 million user economy. But what's going to happen is that they are messing with their credibility, right? So attribution of where you're getting your, your news and information from, all of these steps that I've talked about, that pretty much takes care of most of that. Having said that, I'm a victim of fake news.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Okay, so now I wanted to ask a question of each of you. In your own professional career, a one-off where you, in your organization, have had to deal with misinformation. And I'll give you a simple example where it was not as a career, but just as the public. I was in Australia, and our leading newspaper had a picture of the Ambani's house in Bombay, surrounded by slums. So next time when I was in Bombay, I physically got out of the taxi and went for a walk to try and find where those slums were. And of course, they weren't there. It was photoshopped. So if something that's happened to you in...
Well, I think that the key, again, to go back to it, is just to have those systems in place. And I think the one time that I recall I could have been kind of susceptible, I was almost susceptible to it, is because of this whole, the speed thing of getting it on air first. So this is not really fake news, but it just shows how things can go wrong. It's not your classic fake news thing. But basically, you remember when the whole Gauri Lankesh story was breaking. And I had my sources in the investigation part, and it was a Congress government there, so there were sources within there. Someone very reliable sent me what looked like CCTV footage of the actual, assailants coming and attacking her. And because she or he was really, really reliable, I sent it off to our news desk and said, this is breaking news. This is the actual footage of those people coming in a motorcycle and attacking Gauri Lankesh. And thank God for the fact that, again, so which is why it's such a lesson in NDTV, or as Nilanjana was saying, old-fashioned newsroom SOPs, because that's really the key of tackling fake news. And they said...
Shared context.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they were like, just no, who gave it? I said, no, it's someone really, really reliable. They're part of the government. And they're saying, no, just check that out once. And then they immediately said, oh, this is actually, what do they call it when you dramatization? So it wasn't the actual footage, it was reconstruction. It was a reconstruction of it. And thank God for that, So I think that was the only kind of instance where I would have been the source of fake news by putting out, and this wouldn't have been something which would have led to riots or things like that, but I think that's what it is. The fact that you have to have a whole news team which works for the same ends of saying, are we asking enough questions? Are you second sourcing your information? Even if one senior person says, I've got this from another senior person, are you going and asking the third person or not? Do you know what I mean? And that is a good way of tracking, I think.
Okay, Bhupendra ji?
Actually, this is a daily phenomenon for those of us who do daily programs. And again, I come back to data, because I believe the real difference between fact and fiction is whether you have data to back your claims. Now, you're living in an environment where data is coming to you through WhatsApp images. And slightly to disagree with my friend from the digital world, I believe actually the real challenge is that with the mushrooming of so many digital platforms, and a lot of these are sort of politically inclined, you just don't know. If you were to only subscribe to, let's say, a particular set of politically inclined digital platforms. You don't know what they're saying today. Is that right or is that wrong? And complicating things is that both Twitter and Facebook, unfortunately, because these are all algorithm-driven platforms, you end up reading, say, 3 articles which belong to a particular side of the political divide. The 4th, 5th, and 6th article will also be on the similar side. Now, suddenly you're in a car, you're sort of scrolling down, and in your mind, even if you don't flash that information, even if it's not breaking news, but in your mind, you've already got influenced. You've already got biased. How do you deal with that challenge? Of course, so what I do as a fundamental principle, I just don't take any information which comes on Twitter. I just don't take any information which comes via WhatsApp forwards. A lot of this, the CCTV footage business, a lot of snapshots, photoshopped images, particularly on big news days. If elections are happening, somebody will give you a very, very well-mapped constituency-wise data. And you want to look at it and you want to tell yourself, wow, I mean, this is great, maybe I should go on air with this. But then you come back and you realize that what is there, what looks so great, is actually just fiction. So my thumb rule is I never ever believe what comes on Twitter. If there is some information, I'll either go by my reporter, or if I have to call someone, if I can, I'll call up myself. I'll figure out whatever there is to happen. Since you say that whether we've been victims or not, in a certain way, I myself became a victim. And exactly because of the tendency that Sunetra was talking about to break the story first. Yeah. So there was this whole Me Too episode which was going on. And MJ Akbar was in the line of fire. And someone who again one has known for a very, very long period of time, a higher up in the government, who was watching me on air that day, sent me a WhatsApp message, done. Now, it was just one word, done. And we went to town with it. Anyways, he was supposed to go. You knew he was supposed to go, right? And I fell for it, and we flashed it, and we said he's gone. He went ultimately, but that happened 3 days later, but that very moment he had not gone. So sometimes in this just this great eagerness. So the thumb rule, never believe social media. Thumb rule number 2, it's better to be late. Yeah. Better to be late than be sorry.
No, you and I are actually on the same side of that argument, because what I classify as fly-by-night is all of those guys that you're talking about. I think trusted news brands are really those few that have survived over the years and have actually accumulated users and readers for what they are. So I'll still continue to stress the relevance of trusted news brands, because that's very important. And we shall all celebrate the relevance. I was going to segue into my being a victim of fake news, and that happens every day, because as much as I ensure that my many teams do not and are sort of trained to check and recheck and double check and only then publish, and we are very that context, that Gauri Lankesh thing happened together then, right? And the digital newsroom and NDTV would not take that till we'd all sort of seen whether this was fake or not fake, starting with the presumption that anything that has come to you from an unknown sort of source, and it is on WhatsApp or on social media, should be treated as fake till it's proved real. But every time I go back home after a long, hard day, my mother's waiting with maybe 10 news items, and she believes all of them. She's received all of them on WhatsApp. They go, they will go from the world's ending today to, BJP's winning in these places, or any of these, sites that people have started believing now, because they've really proliferated. They do a very good job of, social amplification. They are on your Facebook feeds because they do social media very well. And I spent my entire time telling my mother, who's very dear to me, or explaining to her how this is fake news, and how every time she receives something from another source on WhatsApp, she has to check what that source is. And I think all of us can do our little bits, and then, by that, the degree of virality, actually ensure that if we trained 6 people to really look at only trusted news sources and trusted news brands, we would go some way.
So now, following on from that, I'll give you an example, but I'd like to ask the three of you, if you can, something where you've interacted with fake news and it's brought a smile on your face. I'll give you my little story. Often, when I'm dressed up as a Videshi and I'm walking around and I'm a bit like this, people come up and ask me if I'm Mr. Bean. And I politely tell them, no, he's my brother. And I've had to stop doing this because every month, Mr. Bean dies. And all of these people, young kids, get terribly upset and are sending me messages on WhatsApp that your brother's died. So it does bring a smile to my face. But it just shows you, one, the power of social media, and two, how misinformation can really have a profound effect. Because every time I receive that, I do feel something, even though I'm pretty sure it's fake and I go and check on it. Now, have you got some story that you can bring a smile to us?
Well, the one that you told me about myself, like, yeah. Charles met me and he's like, it was from a discussion which went viral. And I would never pay attention for a long time because I still believe reporters aren't the story. It doesn't matter. So I still have a very kind of whimsical Twitter timeline where I just talk about the food I eat or the place I go to, and not that much about, and of course to plug my stories, yeah. I want more people to watch my shows and stories, so that's the only thing I do. But I'm saying that, there's so much of that. For example, for a long time, my Wikipedia page said I was born in Sikkim. And people still introduce me in shows saying that, oh, Sunetra was born in Sikkim. No, I'm from the Northeast, but that's Shillong. I don't know who wrote that, but it just stayed. And till I finally got someone to edit it out. So that's one. The second, like what you said, that, there was a segment of my show where I said, as a Congress reporter, and everyone spread it around saying, as a Congress supporter.
And I actually saw that, and I was mentioning to her that I saw that you're a supporter.
No, but even if you go by Congress reporter, yes, it means you're on the Congress beat. It does not mean that you're a reporter who's supposed to, it's ridiculous. Some of it is so stupid. And you don't want to waste time and energy because I don't think what we are matters. It's the stories that we tell. That's what matters. But I think what happens is when like you became the story, right? So I think when people see you, which in print and digital doesn't happen, but when people see you, they think that you become associated with the story so much. So I guess there's interest in that. But I think all of this doesn't really matter that much.
Bhupendra, something that makes us smile?
I have a thick skin, so I'm kind of used to taking abuses. But every time somebody calls me a takla on Twitter, I think that, okay, the guy is trying to be abusive or whatever, but that's the reality. So I just take it in my stride, and I actually love engaging with the so-called trolls. So there are a lot of people who will use, let's say, the most vitriolic language to say something really nasty or really mean. And I always respond and I say, come, my dearest, let's go have a cup of tea. I don't know if this conversation is going on Twitter, on Facebook, but there is one particular Twitter handle. There is a lady called Madhumita Majumdar, okay? And she's amongst my fiercest critiques. So she never misses an opportunity to say something mean, nasty, negative about me every day. So every day, my day cannot end unless there are like 3 really nasty tweets from her. You don't know this, and who's made you a who made you a journalist, and and finally somewhere along the line. And I always tell her, I always refer to her as Dear Madhu. So I always tell her, Dear Madhu, why are you so angry? Come. Which part of the country do you stay in? I will come to you, or you come to me. Let me take you out for a meal. And I've seen that there is a pattern. The moment I try and indulge in humor with people, it doesn't last. The vitriolic aspect of it, the angry aspect of it, does not last for more than 2 to 3 tweets that day. Of course, the next day, then it's a 24-hour cycle. So I kind of enjoy all this, the fake news business.
And Srimati Jha, considering Hindustan Times Digital in charge, that's a big responsibility. You're looking after all of that digital. What fake news have you come across?
Which is why
I
just can't not take fake news seriously. I don't have a single incident that I could think of in all of this time that fake news has made me smile. It usually puts me on an edge. So that's one answer that I'm not going to be able to give you. But yeah, Mr. Bean's been happening for 5 years now, or 6 years.
Right. We've just got a few minutes left. One of the things that I often come across from the public, and I struggle with the reply, I get asked, you worked with a paid media channel, or why aren't you working with that left-wing media channel? And this is something that's thrown out there. How do you guys feel going forward you can build stronger trust in your brand and your channel with the public? I understand you might be doing the right thing. That's not the point. But the point is, how do we build stronger trust with the public? And this is a big issue, I think, that all news organizations are facing.
I work for NDTV. So, no, and you know, we've been doing this for a long, long time. So half the battle's won there. But I think that, you know, I think what Bhupendra's saying is the right thing. I think that these are trying times for the media because of the kind of abundance of fake news that is there, and abundance, and there are some, you know, people in the media now who've done things to break the trust of the public. So that is a problem. But I think we shouldn't focus on that. I think what we need to do is to make sure that we keep doing what we do. What has happened, and I think all in NDTV as well that we've done, is that before, if someone says on Twitter, why is this like this, why can't you, I think there is an effort to immediately fix that. Someone always responds to them, and all tweets, all feedback is always sent to the right person and you know, addressed. So if you think that it's going into a huge vacuum and no one's saying that, no, everybody knows. And you can make out the genuine complaints that people have from people just wanting to pick on you, right? So I think what's amazing is that all news organizations have become really, really sensitive to what public feedback is on social media. So I think it's brilliant. I think the public should use it much more because people are listening and paying attention to what people say.
Very valid point. Bhupendra, have you got 2 minutes?
I don't come from North Korea, and I don't work for North Korean channels. So that's my straightforward two-bit take. I just want to make this very clear. I think that, and I've said this on multiple platforms earlier as well. I find so many people, so many right-thinking people, well-meaning people for India's democracy, always willing to point out how such and such media house is wrong, how such and such media house is biased, how this is wrong. And I always ask them, that boss, okay, fine, on a scale of 10, maybe I'm saying 7 are wrong. Tell me how many times have you pointed out what is right with the media? The same people so what does that do? What it actually does is that the people who may be indulging in, let's say, bad journalism, who may be indulging in propaganda, they come to this conclusion that bad news sells. Maybe wrong news sells, hatred sells. So therefore, they end up giving you more of that. And the more they give you, the more you comment. So it's like a mutually exclusive territory, yes, but both sides are growing at the expense of each other. And caught somewhere in between are those, I would like to believe that it's not a minority, but maybe it is. I can't sort of put a finger on this, but I do believe that there are people who are doing very, very good journalism. I don't just wish to brag about my own self or people I work with or NDTV where I used to work with earlier. I know so many great reporters around who are doing some very, very meaningful stuff. I don't see enough people talking about them. That, I think, is a challenge. If people were to start talking about what's right with the media, I think those who are associated with the wrong side of the media may also take some hint and try and take some course correction.
And
Very
Srimati
quickly,
Jha, your
because
last
I can
2
see
minutes.
the 2 minutes left. You know, I think if you say something loud enough and long enough and enough times, it starts to become like the truth in some spaces. There is a narrative that has developed. That narrative has gone down to those places in family WhatsApp groups where suddenly one of your relatives is going to say, but you know what, you guys are all paid media. So I think this is a challenge. This is a challenge that everyone together has to also sort of look at, not because it's just about a few people who are talking about it, but it is that doctor in your family or that you know, stay-at-home mom in your family who's also now talking about media being paid. The one aspect that we are very clear about is now it's, okay, there are certain houses that certain people will attack, and then there are other houses that other people will attack, but largely all of media is under attack. We are all paid media. We are all, there are other words that are used collectively for us, which I shall not name here. But I think it's a challenge, and I think we will have to counter that together with good journalism, with doing what NDTV has been under attack forever. I know I spent 11 years there, the most balanced journalism that I've ever seen. So from a day-to-day basis. So so we'll deal with it.
So I personally really enjoyed this session, and I thought it's wonderful that 3 large media houses, we've had 3 senior journalists in front of us. I think the advice that they've given us is great, and I've really appreciated it. And I'll just leave you with one last thought. Facebook. Now, Facebook, we all deal with, everybody's connected with it, perceptions. Always be aware that different people perceive differently. And I'll just give you a very quick anecdote, and then we'll finish. When I go back to Australia, some of my relatives look at my Facebook page because it's got thousands of people and all sorts of things happening. And they only have 50 to 150 friends. So they say to me, is this all fake? Can you actually meet that many people? Yet here in India, when you're going for an audition in Bollywood or something, or a journalist wants to interview you, I've noticed many of them, they first go to your Facebook page and see how many followers you've got. So perception is a very interesting thing that one has to look at very carefully when you're trying to give information to the audience. And for some people, they consider it misinformation. For others, they consider that's because they've got a bias. That's correct.
Charles,
so thank you
I
very
want
much.
to interrupt, sorry.
Yes.
I won't say thank you yet because the session is not over.
Oh, okay.
We don't see Sunetra and Bhupendra very often offline and on screen always, but not here. So we want to open up this session to a couple of questions. Maybe anyone out there. That's your chance, please. Otherwise, I have a question. I'll wait for 30 seconds. If you have a question, I'll ask a question. Anyone? No one. Okay, I will ask the question. Bhupen, you said you love to deal with trolls, First, do you really get, when you see vitriolic tweets, does it really bother you, first of all? And second, would you invite Ms. Majumdar on your show? Why don't you do that?
I'll tell you what, I actually planned to do a show, and this was some 2 years back, sometime I think around 2013 or 14. I wanted to call so-called trolls on both sides. On the right side is with the left side. And I said, come, let's do a debate. But guess what? When we actually reached out to them, they refused to come. They said, no, our whatever,
so
our
they
anonymity. And that's where their game was called out. But does it bother me? I must admit, it doesn't bother me now. But as I said, it's the more you get abused, the more you get used to it. Then you learn to take it in your stride. What I now do is that while I largely take Twitter as a loudspeaker, simply to announce what I'm doing. This is the program I'm doing. This is the story that I've done. This is the interview that I've done. That's it. Rest, I don't engage myself with everyone. There are a few people. The reason why I explained about this lady is because, the name is so sweet, Madhu Mita. And I often tell her, you've got someone with such a sweet name.
Sunetra, quickly, one last question. You said that, social media has not to be believed totally, when it comes to looking at the news part of it. But now we see AI getting into newsrooms. So how do you kind of, these contradictory things come together? A technology-driven news plus, how do you kind of come to terms
First,
with
for a big indicator, where's the AI come? China. So I think most of us are realizing the importance of the human touch, Of course, you have lots of people, and I think that we can use that technology to make sure that a lot of the stuff which is not very imaginative, just like tickers or things like that, which doesn't need a personal touch, can be given to them. I think it's interesting that you can leave all the drab work, which people don't want to do, for AI to handle, and we can let us do the anchoring.
Thank you, everyone. Can we have a huge round of applause for all of them? And now I want to invite on stage Mr. John Bailey, partner Ketchum Singapore, to give away a token of appreciation to all of them. Yes, the most important one. Yes. Thank you.